Hey guys, welcome back to Break the Gate podcast. We got Zach Yoshioka of Powerline Management. Zach, thanks for coming on. It's great to have you on. You got a pretty good track record. You know, you've got some pretty cool artists. You know, Butcher Babies, Flyleaf with Lacey Sturm, Escape the Fades, Scary Kids, Scaring Kids, who I grew up listening to as well. So super cool to have you on, and hopefully, teach the fellow Break the Gators some cool info about the
Sure.
entertainment industry.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, for sure. So just to kind of get into it, can you get us a little bit about your journey in the entertainment industry? I know you were a talent buyer at one point with KNC Entertainment, and then you stopped that when COVID kind of started, and now you're just kind of solely
Yeah.
management.
I guess the version of it was when I was in college, I wanted to be a filmmaker, and we were making films and premiering them in the Dollar Theater because YouTube and stuff wasn't around in the early 2000s. And eventually, local bands saw us making music videos. Wanted us to make them music videos because they knew I was a filmmaker. And back then, if you were a filmmaker and had video equipment and editing software, it was kind of like this anomaly. So I started shooting music videos for local
That's true.
bands, and then from there, I did a DVD actually for this group called from Phoenix called the Funk Junkies, and they were on a record label called Suburban Noise Records, and they showed the owner who managed the Cottonmouth Kings this DVD I did for them. So it was like 3 days before I'm graduating from ASU, and I'm 22 years old, that I get this call, and this guy's like, "My name's Kevin Zinger, and I run Suburban Noise Records, and we just broke off a Capitol. Can I put you on tour with the Cottonmouth Kings, and will you make us a DVD?" And I was like, "Sure, that sounds great, whatever." So he gave me some money. I bought
Yeah.
two Panasonic 100A cameras, and I left in May, and I came home in September, a completely different person. And somewhere in the middle of that,
Yeah.
bands, I had shot a lot of like music videos for like live videos for bands like that were live, so like, one time I got a call and this guy's like, "Hey, my name's Neil,
hmm
my band's playing the Marquee Theater, we have a single coming out, can you shoot a live music video for us?" And I was like, "Sure." I would just take the audio and edit live footage over it, and that band was 3 Days Grace. And things like that just kept happening. I had
Nice.
shot the Warp Tour and some things before I toured with the Cottonmouth Kings, but eventually got to the place where
hmm
bands were approaching me like, "Hey, you have connections," or whatever you want to call it. "Do you want to manage our band?" And I'm
Yeah,
23 years old. I'm like, I don't
yeah.
even know what that means. But my friend's band, Morning Maxwell, asked if I would manage them. And I was like, "Well, most of the bands I know have record deals. Let's go find a record deal." So I just blind emailed
Mm-hmm.
some of the connections and relationships that I had at labels from shooting videos. I would ask for the A&R department and who I would talk to down there, and they would give me the email addresses. So in one day of shooting some emails out, I took Morning Maxwell to LA, and we met with Nitro Records, which was the Offspring's label. We met with Immortal Records, which is defunct now, but they signed
Sure.
like Korn and Scary Kids and all that stuff, Incubus. And then we met with Capitol Records, a
Mm-hmm.
guy named Justin Glorifex, who signed like the F Ups and a bunch of stuff over there. And long story short, the band didn't end up getting signed, but I was like, I think I can do this. And from there,
Yeah.
I found this band called Eyes Set to Kill from Albuquerque, Arizona, and they were kind of like buzzing on MySpace. And in 6 months, we were on tour with Papa Roach.
Mm-hmm.
In 8 months, we were on the Warp Tour, and yeah, kind of that was kind of the beginning of me in the music industry side of things. So
Yeah, absolutely. Dude, I love Eyes Set to Kill. I remember that. I remember when they were blowing up. That's such a good and underrated
yeah, it was a
band.
beautiful time. I actually had sushi with Alexia
Um,
and Lindsay yesterday. Lindsay was the singer at the time. It was three
oh,
guys,
cool.
three girls, and
Yeah.
we're still very close. But yeah, it was such an amazing time because you
hmm
could just post on MySpace and everyone saw it. There was no algorithms or anything like that. It was like the Wild West, and as long as you stayed consistent on MySpace,
Yeah.
people would hear your music, and there would be people showing up to shows. So it
Yep.
was kind of a magical
It was
time.
a simpler time. Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to get into that a little bit because you mentioned that you more or less emailed a bunch of people and then they were open to hearing,
Hmm.
the artist. You know, I feel like these days it's not like that anymore. You can't just, cold email somebody and then expect a meeting in LA
Yeah,
the
I
next
was
day.
lucky enough
You know what
to
I
have
mean? There's a lot
yeah
more.
know people at those labels already. So I had a relationship built for the video
Yeah,
side of things. So what I sent them was kind of taken
sure.
serious, which again I didn't
I
know
see.
what I was doing. So I was just a kid right out of college, and
Yeah.
but I was like mystified that like I was being taken serious, and I was able to get these meetings and. Yeah, like I said, that original band never got signed, but then after that, I was like, I feel like I can do this, and that was kind of the beginnings. So.
Okay, yeah. Cool, man. So as an artist manager, what are some of the key responsibilities you have in supporting and promoting the artists that you represent?
So, as an artist manager, you are the point person for the whole team. You will obviously have to delegate and facilitate everything that's happening. So you're like the lead. If the band is the star quarterback and they're getting the glory and the fame and all that, you are the head coach. And then, the rest of the team members, like the record label, the business manager, the publicist, the booking agent, the lawyer, all those other components in their team, those are kind of like if I'm the head coach, then that's the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator and the special teams coach, et cetera, et cetera. So it takes a whole village to really rally around an artist to give them that opportunity to become what the metaphor I use is the star quarterback. So
Okay, gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense, and that's we seem to get that answer quite a bit on because we've talked to a lot of different managers, and we had Randy
I love
Nichols
Randy.
on
I
about a
actually
month
listened to
ago.
it. Randy's
Yeah,
one of my
yeah,
favorite people
Randy's.
ever. He's so smart with marketing, and he knows every
Mm,
quirk of Under Oath inside and out. He just
yes.
it's all a lot of it. What we do is psychological too, and he is just a master at his craft. I
Yeah.
love Randy.
Yeah, I agree. I really liked his perspective on
Mm,
NFTs. I think it's an interesting view on what he's doing with them or what he wants to do with them, and it's still such an early thing to involve
mm,
NFTs with the music industry, and he's doing it creatively to where most people
mhm.
aren't doing, So, and it seems to be working, with the Under Oath album, that they had the availability of doing NFTs for the
Mhm.
Under Oath album, which is a really cool idea.
Absolutely.
Um, do you do anything with that with the NFTs? Are you familiar with the perspective of using it in the music
Yeah, we
industry?
used it. My client Stitched Apart messed with it a little bit during COVID. Um, it was it
Hmm.
was slightly profitable, but not to the point where we felt like it was like a major source of income. I feel like there's a time and a place to do NFTs. If your band's at the level where it makes
Sure.
sense and the fan base will rally around it, and you can build it into the marketing and build it into the product itself. I'm for it, but I haven't been in any situations where I felt like it made the most sense for any of my roster. It's still one of those things where I feel like it's still kind of like in the baby development beta phase where it's being utilized, but no one's really cracked the code on it to do it in a way where it's going to be super profitable for smaller
Yeah.
acts. Mainly for bigger acts is what I've seen it work well with, but you know for me, I'm all about trial and error. So I'll try something a few times. If it works, great.
Sure.
If it doesn't work, all good. I'm not afraid to fail, but I kind of like waiting to see how
Hmm.
things evolve first, then diving in versus just diving in
Sure.
blind. So I've been watching them closely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
A colleague of mine released one with Cypress Hill, and it did okay, but I've just never been fully convinced that it's something to put a ton of effort into with music. But that opinion could
Yeah.
change. I'm always evolving, and I'm always staying current. So
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of not wanting to get in too early, in terms of the perspective of figuring out when's the right time to
mhm.
get something, um, with artists, How do you identify the potential talent and the commitment with artists that you work with? Before you kind of sign them on, what are some of the things that you're
Sure.
looking for?
There's a certain criteria. I was actually talking to a business consultant recently because we're thinking about expanding the company and bringing in more employees and I don't want to say franchising, but bringing in more manpower to pull off the things we want to do. Because right now we have 13 accounts and it's very overwhelming for just me and my wife to be working on it all. So
Mm,
what I've thought about, as far as like expansion and things of that nature, it just kind of looks like one of those things like when it comes to criteria with picking up bands, it's raising that criteria to a place that makes sense for the way you run things systematically. So for me, I have a certain way of doing things. And my old criteria used to be like, it's got to be either grossing a certain amount for me to take it on where the manager is appropriate, or the criteria needs to be like it's got so much
hmm
talent that like I can't help but pick it up because I know it's going to take off like immediately. Like this thing's like on the verge of going viral. So those things used to be the main criteria I'd look for, but now it's not just that. I've definitely worked with difficult narcissistic people in the past, and I've worked with people that did
mm
not value their team, and I won't do that anymore. My life is too short. I'd rather work with people that want to win together as a team and want to be part of
Yes.
the way I fundamentally feel like doing business is the right way. And if you don't want to do it that way, that's all good. I've never been in the criteria where I've said I'm controlling your music, and you're going to dress a certain way and you're going to write songs a certain way. I've never been that guy. But on the business side, I've always ran things a certain way to make things as effective and efficient as possible. So back to the criteria thing, what I look for is can they do what it takes in the business side to let the team do what they need to do for the artist to be successful? Do they have the talent? Do they have the songwriting ability to where if I put them in the room with certain people or we open the doors to certain opportunities, can they thrive? And then the last thing is, do they have the right mindset? I've noticed that
Mm.
some artists just are not ready for success. Like they're not ready to handle the pressure of touring full time or doing interviews whenever they need to, or they just can't handle that pressure. They're literally just not ready for success mentally. And I think it kind of goes back to that, like, should high school players go directly into the NBA? I found that some artists that break in their mid 20s or early 30s sometimes have the maturity and work ethic to be easier to work with. I don't really have a lot of time to be delegating drama when we need to be focusing on the big picture things like business, etc. I've been around a lot of massive artists
hmm
like Shinedown and Breaking Benjamin and Papa Roach, and these are well-oiled machines where everyone in the band and everyone in the team are focused on the big picture. Yeah, there's going to be drama here and there, but at the end of the day, it's just everyone is ready to take that step and everyone takes it as serious as an Olympic gold medalist takes it. So those are the things that I really look for these days. Like I said, there's going to be conflict and tension and problematic things that happen no matter what, but mainly those are the things I look for when working with an artist.
So, what qualities would you say is essential for somebody who's trying to get into the entertainment industry, particularly, artist management and talent buying? I know some of those things are have different mentalities, but more or less the same. You have different strengths for talent buying, versus different strengths through artist management. Could you go into that a little
Sure.
bit?
For someone going into artist management, I think the number one thing is it just takes time. You got to have endurance. There's two ways you could approach it. You could go work at a larger management company as an intern or something and try to learn that way. Or you could do what I did, which I don't recommend, is go out and just help bands and learn along the way. It took a long time. I would
Yeah.
say our management company didn't take off until around 2011 when my business partner started managing a group called Asking Alexandria, and that kind of put us on the map.
Mm.
I had picked up Matt Good, and we orchestrated the return of From First to Last, those reunion shows with Skrillex as well. But it took a long time. It took managing a lot of like local bands and baby bands to even get to that point. And even today, I still don't know if we ever are going to get the feeling like we fully arrived. We are a boutique company, and you have to look at it intentionally on like, are you going to try to be part of the corporate system and work your way up along the ladder to where eventually they hand you Breaking Benjamin, or do you want to build it on your own and end up more like a Bill McGathy, where you have like Shine Down, Pretty Reckless, and a handful of like larger acts, Hailstorm, etc. Another great boutique example is Velvet Hammer. Mark and Bino over there have Korn,
Mm-hmm.
System of a Down, Deftones, and I think Code Orange, and that's pretty much all they have. So
Yep.
if you want to get into it, like I said, you can go intern at a bigger company and try to work your way up the ladder, be a junior manager, and eventually build your own roster. Or you can go off and do it on your own. So those are kind of the two ways. But you gotta
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of endurance. You gotta be not afraid to fail, and you've got to be willing to make a very, very small amount of money for a long time until you eventually do break to a place where the larger acts will want to work
Yeah.
with you, and pay you, etc. It's very it takes a long time. I mean, when I look back on it, I think I would have done things a little bit differently. I think I would have been bigger on the criteria side on who I was going to pick up. I was more on the side of
Sure.
like, do they have the talent and the work ethic? But there's so many things that go into making an
Yeah.
artist successful that I've learned through growing pains over the years. So that's the advice I'd give for someone trying to get into artist management, and just mainly be open to being a sponge and learning as much as you can. And thankfully, I was also
Yeah.
able to spend 14 years as a promoter from 2007 to 2014. So, or sorry, 2020. But if you're going to be a promoter, that's a tough one. I got into being a promoter because my management clients were getting ripped off by other promoters, and I
Mm.
felt like it would be easier for me to just do the show myself and have my clients not get ripped off, than let someone else do a poor job and rip us off. So when I started throwing shows, it was for my management clients, and word got out that Zach's a really good promoter and he's fair and he's not ripping anyone off. I didn't own a venue, so I was a third party promoter. So when you're a third party promoter, pretty much all the expenses are real. There's nothing to hide. You are paying the band what you're paying, and you're paying the venue what you're paying. There's no way to really be
Mm-hmm.
shady about it, if you want to put it that way. So I was an honest promoter and I worked really hard, and word got out. We got into the agency systems, and then by 2010, we had booked, I think, 40 of 45 artists that were on Vans Warped Tour. And when metalcore started to take off, we were booking all the bands that were on the Pantheon agency and then into UTA, et cetera. And yeah, then my partner started managing Asking Alexandria, and every band in that genre, we were booking the All Stars tour. Um, we were booking
Nice.
Summer Slaughter, all those things. And eventually that led into booking, the SoundCloud rappers. And, we did shows for 21
Mm-hmm.
Pilots and Travis Scott and all kinds of things. So if you're going to be a promoter, I would say start with local shows, do it simple first.
Yeah.
Start from the ground up, learn through low risk, high reward situations. And then once you learn through that, contact agencies, tell them about the shows you've done, build relationships, and then just keep going. I'll be honest, most booking agencies see promoters as an ATM. They don't really see them as people who are trying to build and develop a market. But there are good agents out there,
Mm.
and if you can build relationships with those agents, you can get those bigger shows. But the biggest part of advice I'd say is, if you're going to be a promoter, you need to have lots of shows on sale at one time. You can't just go one show at a time, because if that show fails, there's nothing to back it up. So the way we did it, and this is not,
Oh, right.
like I said, this is not recommended. We were booking, 12 to 15 shows a month at one point. Sometimes we had 4 shows in one day. But when the ticket gross was coming in, it was enough to pay for the shows that were losing. And then as the shows were winning, that would, balance it all out. So we never really profited a lot of money, but the machine kept going because we kept booking shows all the time. And we were really, really
Sure.
smart with being trying to make sure we were finding the artists that were like cutting edge. Like when we saw Puya and Suicide Boys and all that stuff, a Lil Peep rising up, we were the first to be knocking on those agents' doors like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I want that show when it comes through. it was the same thing, with a lot of the YouTubers and stuff. We were doing shows for Danny Duncan and Danny Gonzalez and a lot of these guys, and we were not fan buying. We were booking shows to make money to pay for the more shows that were coming. So, and by time 2020 hit, I
Sure.
was so exhausted from like being in clubs all the time and just dealing with tour managers and venues, and because like I said, when you're a third party promoter, you got to deal with the venue and the band side and the agent side. I didn't own a venue, and I didn't have like the
Yep.
alcohol revenue or the
Yep.
parking revenue or service fees and all those things. I just had the ticket cash, and if the show was losing, I was losing. So it was a dangerous game,
Yes.
but
Yep.
it can be done. And if you have the stomach for it and the passion for it, and you really like developing artists in a market, that is the way to go about being a talent buyer. Start small, low risk, high reward, and then you can get into the bigger high risk, high reward. But they're
Yeah.
also high risk, low reward at times too. I learned some very, very valuable lessons, but when we did it, I don't know, we were just out for blood. And what the best part I loved about being a talent buyer, and this is for anyone that wants to be one, you get to be in the cutting edge of everything that's coming up quick. You'll be the person that books the shows for 21 Pilots in the Nile
Mm.
basement where 100 people show up. You could be the person that does Travis Scott on a Monday where 86 people show up, and then a year later he's playing the Super Bowl dating Rihanna. I saw some crazy
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
but yeah, you'll get to witness those lightning in a bottle bands in the trenches
Yeah.
early on. That was the kind of one of the coolest things about being a promoter. So
So I had actually booked Spite at one point in Milwaukee, and as you know now, they're huge. But when I booked them, they were still very much of an establishing artist. And when I booked them, we had 15 people
sure,
show up.
yeah, I've had
So
those shows.
yeah, so I definitely, yep, I definitely feel that, that perspective of like you get to see the up and coming. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because now Spite is selling out, large venues,
Yeah.
500,000 cap venues, but 4 or 5 years ago when I booked them in Milwaukee, um, we had 15 people. So,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's not to say that they weren't good. It's just, they just hadn't got there yet. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
A lot of it's an investment too. Like I would book these bands where, I remember the first Asking Alexandria show I did, it only did like 500 people, and it sold out this room, but I got to ride it all the way to the top doing shows for it when it was doing, 2,000 people, etc. So, sometimes when you're booking like a Travis Scott show on a Monday night and it only does 80 people and you lose $1,000, I got to book it a second time when it did 1,500 people with him and Young Thug
Mm,
co-headlining, and we made our money back that we lost. So it's just one of those things. It was the
yeah.
ecosystem of like, hey, if these agents believe in these artists, I'm gonna book them all, and it's just a mathematical probability that one of them will hit out of 100, and then you can make money on that as it goes up. Unfortunately, sometimes they go up so fast that you aren't able to hang on to it. Like 21 Pilots, I did it in the basement of the Nile, and
Yeah.
then it was in the arena the next year. So, and Live Nation bought the whole team.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just like bye bye.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. Especially once Live Nation gets involved, you might as well
yeah.
just consider it gone.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's no co-promote.
uh,
There's no like honoring history. It's
yeah.
just gone. So,
Right, absolutely. We have so I'm in East Troy, Wisconsin now, and we have Alpine Valley down the
okay.
street there. And I remember distinctly when the conversation was happening when Live Nation was taking over Alpine Valley. Because some of the guys that were doing the shows there are now at the Pabst Theater Group.
Mm.
And they moved over to there because Live Nation got them out. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And it used to be they would do a ton of concerts, but now it seems like you basically have to be like a Willie Nelson or some other caliber artist of that size for Live Nation to use the stage now because it's just a bare bones stage. There's no sound with it. There's no lighting. It's outside. It's extremely expensive to maintain and equip. So you basically have to be committed to selling, thousands of dollars of tickets to be able to even think about having shows there. And I think Alpine probably realized that, they were going to lose money if they didn't bring in a conglomerate, a major conglomerate like Live Nation.
Oh yeah. The key
So,
is, like I said,
there's good things and bad things to it.
yeah. The key to being a promoter for all you upcoming talent buyers: be ready to do a lot of them. And again, do the
Yeah.
low risk, high reward ones with local bands first, and then build towards the bigger one. But even the first 5 years of being a talent buyer, I put every dollar we made back into the company to build the company, and eventually I had the money to make deposits and take those high risks in order
Yeah.
to build the company and build relationships and ride the bands to the larger spots. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, in your opinion, what are some of the more significant changes and trends that you've observed in music industry? I know that you've been in long enough to see it from a MySpace era to where as long as you were posting regularly, you could you know stay relevant. And then now I'd say you have to be kind of a TikTok star and you have to be an Instagram famous, and those are significant changes and trends.
yeah.
What are the ones that you are recognizing from a management perspective?
Yeah, there's two of them. One is the obvious inflation after COVID, and the other one before that has been streaming with DSPs. Early when I first
Mm-hmm.
started in the like early 2007s or whatever is when our company started to like actually manage bands on a serious level. It was all about the merch bundle with the pre-order, and it was all about like how many units we were
Yes.
selling per week, and we were sound scanning on at venue the CDs per show and just all that thing. It was all about the physical. And then in 2015, Spotify and streaming started becoming the main place, and everyone was up in arms because the big advances at the labels went away because you're only making point zero zero
Yeah.
four of a penny per stream. But as we've adapted and as we've evolved with streaming, kind of what I've realized is that Spotify is the same as Instagram. If you're not dropping, uh, if you're not posting or dropping a song on a regular basis, it's very difficult to stay relevant. And I think that's why DJs and rappers have been able to stay ahead of the curve versus rock and metal, because they self-record. They're able to just create the songs faster and get them out faster. Hence, you go to bat more times, eventually you'll hit a home run and you'll go viral. So what I've seen with a lot of it has been, the big advances of the labels have gone away. But what I love about streaming is like the Energizer Bunny. It's not perishable. With an iTunes download or a CD, you get $10 or 99 cents once, and then it's over. Now we're licensing music to people
Mm.
versus selling it to them. So with streaming, pretty much every band recoups at some point. It might take 10, 15, 20, 30 years of streaming, but if that money's coming in, it's eventually going to recoup at some point. You might not be alive when it recoups, but it'll recoup at some point. And what I've noticed is that
Yeah.
if you're generating 2 to 4 grand a month in streaming or whatever that number is for a record label, why would they keep promoting and investing into your band if they know that 18, 21 months from now, they're going to have their money back? They can almost green light the next album for you to work on because they know they're going to be broken even 18, 20 months later. So even if you're in the red with them, they can green light the next album, which I think is kind of cool because, we're having the record label take the risk on it and, pay for the music videos, etc. But the downside of that is they own the master. And when we are not on that record
Yeah.
label anymore, they're still going to own that master. They're still going to be exploiting that streaming,
Yeah.
etc. So about 80% of my roster now are independent. We use 1 RPM, stem distribution, blood blast distribution for a lot of the heavier stuff. and they'll give us an advance. We own the masters, we own the physical, we own the publishing, and once that advance is recouped, we get a massive royalty rate versus the small royalty rate we'd get on a record label. So that has been one of the biggest
Yeah.
changes is streaming. I love that music continues to make money every day and it's not perishable. But I do miss the
Hmm.
days where you could sell 50,000 records first week and you could go get a multi-$100,000
Yep.
advance from a label. I mean, those are things that I do
Yep.
miss. But in the long term, we're
Absolutely.
actually
I do remember that time being sorry, no, I was going to say, I do remember that being that time, where first week sales basically made or break
yeah.
your career,
Yeah, and
essentially.
unless you were
You know?
releasing a deluxe edition or a remix album or whatever, it just
Yeah.
stopped selling. Now it just goes and goes
Yeah.
and goes forever. It's interesting. Everyone was all up in arms about that Scooter Braun purchasing the Taylor Swift catalog. Bought it for $300 million. But if that thing's generating $30 million in streaming, in 10 years, Scooter Braun's got his money back. In 20 years, Scooter Braun's got $600 million. In 30 years, Scooter Braun's got $1 billion. So it's all about the catalog.
Yeah.
And when you look at like Rise Records or Artery Recordings or Victory selling their catalogs off, it makes sense because
Yep.
the people buying them don't care about the accounts or anything like that. All they care about is that, hey, this streaming catalog is generating this amount per album per month. And that's how they judge the value on it. So if that's true, then I want to own my masters and I want to be as DIY as possible with most of my clients so we can
Yeah.
reap the benefits of those DSPs. However, I still believe in record labels to a degree. If you're trying to be Drake or Justin Bieber or Ariana Grande, you cannot reach that level without the corporate machine behind you. But if you're a band that is playing 500 cap rooms to 2,000 cap rooms, you can absolutely be independent without a major label support. But you will eventually hit a ceiling because you will not be able to promote at the corporate level that they can. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like it's rare to find artists that can do that. I think a good example of that is A Day to Remember.
sure, I remember Tech
because
Nine.
they were one of the few artists. Yep. So they were one of the very few artists that was able to get off of a major label and still do very, very well. And that attests to how much they grasped on the industry,
Mhm.
how things work on the business level.
Yeah.
And that takes a special group to be able to recognize that and practice those after, finishing with the label.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, not everybody in a band, is going to have that same mentality. They just hit right place, right time with the right people, the right genre. They fell into it, around the time when, people were tired of a lot of the other things that was already out there. And they just hit that chord with a lot of people. And they were able to ride that, all the way to the top and stay there on their own.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the other thing, the inflation. I mean, my tour budgets from 2019 versus 2023. It is like night and day. Everything from blank T-shirts to tour buses to fuel. It's up at least a third, sometimes 2/3 in certain things.
Wow.
It's crazy because my bands are growing and they're grossing more money. But it's so hard to look back at the 2019 budgets to now because it's just. If this was 2019, some of us would be wearing silk underwear right now. So,
Sure, absolutely. Do you think some of that is just from COVID, with the rise of demand? Everybody's back on the road now. So,
yeah, I mean, there's things like supply chain. I mean, the venues were closed for 18 months, so they're all in debt trying to recoup SBA loans. The bus company, same thing. The buses sat for 18 months, so they're trying to recoup SBA loans. Fuel is what it is. It's just, there's nothing you can do to change it. I mean, we just got the settlement back from one of my clients from Australia, and I was looking at it, and I was like, this doesn't seem right. This seems really light. But then when you really break down the expenses and you look at life after COVID on what it costs to run a show at a venue, it's night and day. Things changed, and you got to do the best you can to keep up with it. And unfortunately, the only way to offset it is ticket prices for patrons are larger than ever because it's costing more to tour. So when people are complaining about these massive ticket prices, etc., you also got to understand that Live Nation and Ticketmaster were closed for 18 months as well. Everyone's just trying to get back to a place of reset, and the people getting crucified
Right.
for the sins of the patrons, unfortunately. But hopefully,
Yeah, absolutely.
with the next election and places, things like that, we can get back to a better place with the economy, not only with the concert side of things, but just the world in general. But honestly, COVID
Yeah.
changed everything, So that's what
Yeah, it
the
did.
biggest, most discouraging part of it, because we're over here with my clients, we're just trying to put out music to the world. And I really, truly believe that being a musician and a songwriter is a key part of society. They play a very important role in society, and I really wish there was a way to make it more fair. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Can you go into a little bit more of the role of technology and social media and the success of artists? How do you personally use these platforms to promote your
sure.
artists? Because that's something that everybody's trying to figure out how to do.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's all about the DSPs and streaming now. So whatever you can do content wise and posting wise, whether it be Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it may be, you're trying to drive people to the DSPs so they continue to stream, they continue to stay active with it. You can sit on TikTok and make funny videos. You can go on Instagram and just, make sure you're making reels and posts and stuff. And hey, we got this song coming out, et cetera, et cetera. But we're in such an ADD world now that unless you're
Hmm.
dropping something new, things get old pretty quick. I mean, I feel like when a
Yep.
band drops a single or an album, 2 weeks later, it's just old. That sounds
Yes.
harsh because we've all poured our hearts and souls into this, but it's just the reality. It's just old.
Hmm.
And you've got to continue to drop content around it or tour to make sure the song stays relevant and stays spinning. What I've noticed with Escape the Fate, when they tour, their DSPs go up because they're not playing to people; they're playing to people's cell phones. And when they're playing to people's
Mm.
cell phones, they're going to Spotify, they're following, they're streaming the song afterwards, etc. So it's changed now. We used to go on a tour to hustle CDs and sound scan them once a week, and now we're
Yep.
going out on tour to make sure they hit that QR
Yeah.
code and start
Yeah.
streaming and following and making sure all that goes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just
Yeah.
that's been the biggest change I've seen, and everything is it's all about the DSPs, and social media is literally to drive people to the DSPs. So that's
Yep.
as simple as I can put it. And you can talk algorithms, you can talk content and different tricks and whatever, clickbait all you
Sure.
want. But really, what we're doing with social media is we're trying to drive people to the DSPs. So
Yeah. Oh man, I forgot about SoundScan. I forgot that was a thing, and now
yeah,
it was like the bread and butter, and now it's like, oh, that's right. That was a thing it was a tool that we had to use.
I don't care about Billboard or
Um
SoundScan anymore.
it
All I care about is how many streams you do first week.
yeah.
Wow, that is impressive.
Well,
300,000 streams,
absolutely.
2 million streams. Like that's all I care about.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Unless, you're a larger artist, you know, you may not even get to that point to where you might chart on Billboard.
Yeah.
The last artist that I managed was Dreamhouse. They're based out of Milwaukee.
Mhm.
They toured with Johnny Craig. They did Warped Tour run. And right before I left them, they charted on the Heat Seekers
Hmm.
for Billboard. And it did very, very well. That single did very, very well. Couple years, or no, just I guess yeah, a couple years ago they released a track, and it surpassed 1 million on Spotify, but it didn't chart Billboard.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it was weird,
Yeah.
because there's that change,
SoundScan
in
changed the
the
rate
way
of
the
streams per
environment
unit
works.
too. Yep. Yeah, that really messed
Yeah.
everyone up on first. I can't
So
remember when it was. It was like during the pandemic, SoundScan changed the rate of streams, which equaled 1 unit, and that threw everyone's numbers
yep.
off. And then they changed the thing
Yeah.
too with a bundle. You can only SoundScan one thing from a bundle, not two things from a bundle. Now there's all these
Oh yeah.
weird things that go into it that stop artists from charting a certain way. But at the end of the day, to
Yeah.
me, it's more about building a fan base and conversion.
Yep.
You could flex with the Billboard, post all you want. At the end of the day,
Sure.
you're really just trying to get people to follow your band and stay loyal to it versus being like Tinder and swiping to the next band. I think the most dangerous thing on
Yeah.
Spotify is the other artists you may like or other artists that are like this artist, because it's literally just killing the loyalty in your
Yes.
artist to that. Like when you used to buy a CD,
Yep.
I committed to listening to the CD, and I committed to the CD being in my CD booklet. Now with Spotify,
Yep.
it's just as music is just as disposable as Tinder or anything else in the swiping world. So
Yep. You're absolutely right. It's really hard to capture that DSP listen from like TikTok or Instagram. You know, I know they've got different things like, you know, Beacon, Time Tree, or Time Tree. You know, a couple other things that you can put into the link, you know, on your TikTok, and it'll bring you to your Spotify. But it's weird because it doesn't integrate well. You know, it typically it brings you to like a web browser, at which point you can listen to it, but it doesn't log you into Spotify. You know, so you have to almost have a conscious mind to be like, okay, well, I'm going to go to Spotify and I'm going to look up the artist now, and then I'm going to follow them and I'm going to listen to the song. And as you said, everybody's ADD, so most people aren't going to do that. You know,
yeah.
It's that capturing of the data, you know, the feedback from, you know, Instagram, TikTok, and moving it over to Spotify is a really hard thing to do. And it was interesting to see labels picking up people off of TikTok followers and, you know, and likes and views, because they felt like, oh, well, they did very well in this platform, so obviously it's got to translate. And it didn't. You know, it didn't translate at all because people are just people. That's the way we are.
Sometimes,
you know?
like my buddy found Bailey Zimmerman on TikTok and took him all the way to the top. But you know, again, that's the lightning in a bottle. I was watching this Rick Rubin interview of 60 Minutes the other day, and Rick Rubin said the best thing. He said that record labels and producers and most bands out there are trying to just give people what they want. And Rick Rubin said, people don't know what they want. People only know what they heard last. So if you can make them feel something and make them feel something that's genuine and authentic, then you will win. And I thought that was a really bass-ackwards way of putting things, but it makes a lot of sense because obviously if a hamburger sells well at In-N-Out, McDonald's is going to try to do something that sells well just like that, and everyone's copying each other. Next thing you know, Taco Bell is selling French fries, but I think when it really comes down to it, if you can make people feel something and then the artist actually feels something, it will get back to those roots of translating. Howard Benson's a pretty good buddy of mine, and he said that when he worked for Clive Davis years ago, he said that the way they pick songs to produce had nothing to do with music. He said Clive Davis and him would sit there with the lyric sheets of songs, and they either liked the lyrics or they didn't. And if they didn't like the lyrics, the song was not getting produced. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. But the hit and how do we replicate a hit? And does the audience really know what they want, or does the audience only know what came before? So those are all interesting things to think about.
Yeah, I mean that's why sometimes you'll get 6 different songwriters on one song. You know, it's very much of like trying to figure out, you know, what people want to hear, you know, how to construct the sound, the lyrics around the music, and you know, it's a whole thing. You know,
absolutely.
So what steps would you recommend someone who's trying to be an artist manager for bigger artists? You know, because you've kind of went from, you know, the smaller artists, and now you're managing artists who are touring around the world, you know, selling out, you know, large venues. Are there specific things that people should be focusing on to be able to get to that realm?
To get to managing bigger ones? You can get a job, like I said earlier. You can get a job at a management company, and you get to a place where they might just hand you a large artist. Like my buddy who used to manage Blake Shelton, he works at Rock Nation now. He got over there, the first artist they handed him was Lil Uzi Vert. My buddy who managed Gym Class Heroes for years joined Crush Management. He gets there one weekend, they said, here's Courtney Love, you know? You can go about it like that, where you have a track record with something that's a little smaller, and then they give you something larger. Where, you know, you're challenged at the company. But I also think that, you know, it's not as difficult as you would think. If you have strong criteria and a strong foundation, you could take a band 0 to 100, you know, and you can also be the guy that come in and take a band that was at 100 and has kind of dropped down and fix the infrastructural things that are happening to make the band more efficient on the business side, to get it back to a place where it's consistent and become on top again, So there's really no formula
Yeah.
for it. I've known people that didn't know anything about management and they were managing their friend's band and suddenly it's huge. I've seen situations
Yeah.
where, Echo Smith's their dad, managed the band as a local band and blew
Yeah.
up, and he's still the manager today. So I think that more so than anything, it's more about like, can you recognize what's working and can you amplify that? I always use the In and
That's
Out
true.
Burger
Yeah.
menu as the perfect example. When I go and work with bands, I look for the ingredients that work. I don't look up to fill the menu with 5 billion things. I look for the ingredients that work and I try to amplify those. And if you can identify those things,
Yeah.
you can see a band grow, whether it be brick by brick or a big one. But there's real no
Sure.
set path to just managing big bands. I would say more than anything, just immerse yourself with as much information, do as many internships on all sides of the business to learn, and just be willing to put in the time. I've noticed that, like Seth Rogen made the best quote one time. He said, "If you don't quit, you might make it, but if you quit, you definitely
Yeah.
won't." It's as simple as that. And he talks about
That's true.
the guy that played Magneto. He didn't become big until he was 65 years old. The next thing you know, he's Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, but no one knew who Ian McKellen
Yeah.
was until he was 65 years old. But he enjoyed what he did. He was just some random off Broadway actor, and he just stuck with it,
Yeah.
and he enjoyed the journey. And I think that's the biggest part of if you're going to pursue anything in life, whether it be artist management or talent buying or being in a band, etc., just know that you're never going to
Yeah.
arrive at a place where you feel like you've made it or there's this like satisfaction of I'm number one. Because if you look at the documentaries with Metallica, Machine Gun Kelly, Lady Gaga's another great
Hmm.
one, her documentary on Netflix, when they are number one, when they are on top, they're more miserable than ever because I think that psychologically they believed that
Yeah.
they were going to reach this place of peace, and there was going to be
Yeah.
some sort of like fulfillment there, and it's just not there. The guys in Metallica are getting
Sure.
divorced and crazy things like that. Lady Gaga, her manager walks up to her at the end of the documentary, and the manager's like, "You're number one all over the world, and the entire world tour is sold out in stadiums," and she looks lost. And Machine Gun Kelly's manager's calling
Yeah.
him in that Hulu documentary, telling him, "Hey, you're number one for the second time." And 5 minutes ago, he had pulled a shotgun out of his mouth. So, I mean, that's just the
Yeah.
sad, sad part of, I think, making things in your life idols that shouldn't be, like career or whatever, when really the number one thing in your life should probably be family, being kind to people, being loving. Those are probably the things we should prioritize, because when you get what you want, it's just never going to satisfy. And that's the biggest thing I've learned in this journey is, um, I don't know, like our company had Asking Alexander, and my business partner thought we were going to be millionaires. And then Danny left the band,
Yeah.
and, he was
Yeah.
bummed out about it, and it just never was what it was. But, we were able to take bands like Escape the Fate and Butcher Babies and Lacey Sturm and put Flyleaf back together and all those things.
Yep.
And all those things are exciting, but they've never been what I've considered life to actually be about. And I think that
Yeah.
if you're going to strive for those big places, just keep those things in the back of your head. Like, hey, this will be cool temporarily, but it's never going to satisfy me, So,
Absolutely. I think there's two components to that too. It's the finding happiness in success is really hard to do because every time you get to a certain point in your career, there's always going to be like, all right, well, now I want to get to there. And now I want to get to there. And if you don't stop and take a look of how far up the ladder you've already been, you're never going to know how big the ladder is.
yeah,
You know what I
just
mean?
enjoy the journey. You
It's
got to
just,
do it because you love it.
yeah,
That was the whole point of
yeah,
Ian McKellen. He did it because he loved it. And yeah, he got to
right.
be Magneto and Gandalf, but he was 65 years
Yep.
old. Like, so.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then the other component to that too is you're absolutely right with there not being a path to being able to manage, larger artists.
Mhm.
I have a friend, Sierra, she worked with Warped Tour, Sierra Lyman. She was Kevin's daughter.
Mm,
She started out, doing, NPO manager for Warped Tour. And then she was getting her degree in graphic design. And that's what she was going to do because her ultimate goal was to work for Vogue or Cosmopolitan or
sure.
one of the magazines. And then magazine died out, essentially.
Mm.
So she was working for Six Man for a while, and then now she started working for a company called The Family, and
Mm.
she's a junior artist manager for Avril Lavigne.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So the path for most people is all over the place, and there's
Mhm.
yes, there's the basic structure of like, yes, you could intern at a label, you could be working in the mailroom, you could work your way up, but you don't have to be afraid if that's not something that you're able to do. If you can't get the job as the intern at the record label, don't stop there, because obviously everybody's path is different. You can find something that's going to get you to that next step, and then it'll get you to the next step. Just have fun with it.
Yeah. You have to
Manage your
just
buddy's
decide.
band, book your favorite shows.
You
Yeah.
got to decide intentionally what you want your life to look like later, and then work backwards from it. I always wanted to be my own boss.
Yeah.
So the idea of interning somewhere never
Sure.
made sense to me. I just dove in and just did it myself and learned the hard way. Because if you have a vision to be something, you have to set that goal and work backwards towards it. So yeah, I just never saw the way as being like, climbing a ladder when someone else's fortress. It was more like build my own fortress, and that'll be that. But there's pros and cons to each way. And, I'm not managing arena acts by any means, but I've had a handful of clients,
Sure.
tour with the arena acts. And I do believe with the promoter
Yeah.
backing I've had, we'd be more than qualified to work on projects that large. But you just keep learning, you keep growing, and yeah, you just enjoy the journey as it comes. Because if you get too caught up in what other people are doing, or where you're at for where your age is, etc., it's not productive. You need to have tunnel vision and just like
Yeah.
focus on like what I'm trying to achieve, and anything's possible. I mean, we're all built with the same cells as anyone else. The only
Yeah,
difference is
absolutely.
that some
Yeah.
people are better with endurance and some people are better with pressure. So
Sure, absolutely. So, how important is it for an artist manager to have industry contacts? I know you mentioned that helped you in the beginning with getting some your management career started. Do you feel like it's important for a manager to have industry contacts, or is it really more about the work ethic?
Um, it is important, but it's not the be all end all. If you have something that's special and you are creating through marketing something that is very, very attractive, they will come to you. And
Mm.
as time goes on, and as you've worked with more clients where you've had people come after you, you build those relationships and you build those contacts and you build that repertoire. I mean, during COVID, I felt like was the best time to strike as an artist manager or someone trying to build contacts, because no one was doing anything. They were just networking. They were seeing what was going
Yeah.
on. They were just poking around. They were just trying to fill their time. So I did meetings, as many Zoom meetings as I could with as many people as possible to try to build my network. And when COVID ended, my roster was stronger than ever. And I was the one guy that was able to figure out a way to make money not touring, and that was through Twitch. And that's a whole other story. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was really cool because I just spent so much time on LinkedIn Premium hunting down people. And you
Yep.
can email anyone if you have a LinkedIn Premium account. You can email the
Yep.
head guy at Coca-Cola, or you can email the head guy at Capitol Records. It's all right there. I do have a Polestar
Hmm.
Pro account where I'm able to contact the record labels, management companies, and agencies of all that. But I would say being in the video business first and then being a promoter, I had just built so many relationships with so many bands and stuff over that time period, that by time I was doing management full time without being a promoter, I just knew everyone everywhere. But it doesn't
Yeah.
mean I can just pick up the phone and someone will give me $1 million deal. I still have to
Sure.
bring something to the table that is mutually beneficial in business. And that's the thing, is like, I think fundamentally you always got to look at it as, is the product, the client, something that I can present to people where they will get into a mutually beneficial business agreement, whether it be a record label or a publicity deal or whatever it may be, a show negotiation? Is it mutually beneficial? And to me, that is more valuable than anything. It's just building
Yeah.
something that has value, and then using the fundamental of, hey, is it mutually beneficial? And that's what will propel an artist's career. So
Absolutely. We had a conversation with Ricky Armanillo from Ice Nine Kills And he mentioned something very close to that, where you have to develop your brand and have a brand that's presentable to where you are employing people other than just your artists, your managers, and your talent buyers. You
Mm-hmm.
know, your stage hands, your drum tech, your guitar techs, like those are all people who are hired on a tour, to take care of the band. You want to be able to present that your brand as a way that you could do that. You could provide that for you,
Mm-hmm.
for the label or for whoever, and
Absolutely.
I,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Building a team around your band or brand or whatever you want to call it, it's key. Like just getting
yeah,
people on board and making sure people stay inspired, not drained.
yeah,
Those are all key components. I look at like Social Distortion, same manager, same agent, same label, same everything, whole career, and that is what has built them into the legacy act they are today. They never had peaks and valleys. They were just Social D, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger,
yep,
a little bit bigger. And it's the same thing with Slipknot. Back in the day, Limp Bizkit and Deftones were bigger than Slipknot, and now Slipknot's the king because every year,
yep,
a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. They never skyrocketed to the top. Every year, they just kept building. And I think the brick by brick mentality will keep loyalty with fans and your team stronger than skyrocketing to the top. Everyone's trying to jump on board, and then the next single doesn't hit, and people are like, "Well, that was cool. See you later."
sure, yeah, absolutely. Uh, I had thought about this question earlier when we were talking about releases, and then I forgot it because I also have an ADD mind. In terms of releases, have you felt that there was effectiveness in the waterfall effect or the waterfall release plan, or is there something better than that? Because it's like the single, the music video, whatever. Do you find value in that?
It's a case by case basis. If you're a band that you're trying to build your algorithm up, I would say a single every 8 weeks makes sense, and then content in between those eight
Hmm.
weeks to build, make sure the streaming stays relevant or keep the band on tour during those 8 weeks, so the streaming continues, and then the next single rides off the algorithm of the one before, and so forth and so forth. That is one way to do it. But if you're as big as Eminem, you could drop a whole album without anyone knowing about it, and that thing's going viral no matter what.
That's fair. Yeah.
It really comes down. Like you can sit here and say that this is the path to do it, but it's a case by case basis, and it also goes to where the artist is in their career. If they're an artist that's already established, I might take a different approach. If it's an artist
Sure.
that has no following and no algorithm, then you got to go brick by brick, and waterfall might make more sense. So I
Yeah.
am big on releasing singles, at least like 5 to 6 singles before an album comes out. But sometimes it makes more sense with where tour lands, etc., to do 2 or 3 singles. So it's all about
Sure.
aligning the planets, and wherever I see the most convergence waiting to happen down on the timeline is how I'm going to line it up. So
Yeah. Absolutely. So the things like the waterfall, DSPs, all that stuff, those are all kind of knowledge pieces that you learn
oh
by
yeah,
being in the industry and working and developing that vocabulary.
yeah.
Is it crucial, would you say, for an artist manager to have a deep understanding of how the music industry works in its various sectors, publishing, touring, marketing, and then knowing some of those terminologies that come with it?
Yes, you should be very, at least surface level knowledgeable on logistics for touring, metadata, publishing. It's important to do deep dives with contracts, all those things. And a lot of it's situational. I never went to music or business school. I learned all of it pretty much just by being in those situations. But the more you can know about all the aspects, the more stronger and more weapons you'll have when it comes to actually dealing with them. There's no right or wrong way. I mean, I think the number one thing is if you don't know, be able to have the humbleness to say, I don't know, but I'm smart enough to
Yes.
figure it out, and I'm willing to put in the commitment to become an expert in it. And like
Yeah.
I said, I don't know everything about publishing or sound exchange or whatever, but I know enough to where my instincts are there. But I do use pub consultants, and I do use certain pub companies and stuff to help me on things that I'm not an expert in. That's why bands hire lawyers and publicity
Yep.
people and have a booking agent, et cetera. You hire people that are 100% experts in those lanes to help serve the band better, and then the manager is the liaison to all of it. But the more you know about all of them, the more powerful you
Yeah.
are. I feel like I watched enough bands as a promoter go from the van and trailer to the bus back to the van and trailer where I could see in the
Sure.
trenches what was happening. And, sometimes certain albums didn't hit on the second album, and I didn't understand why. But then when you really did the research into it and you saw how much work was put into the one that did hit or the timing of it, et cetera, you could start creating at least theories on why a band could be more successful if they did it this way versus that way. But again,
Yeah.
really it comes down to the song. Is the song affecting people? Is the song making the hair on your arm stand up? Is the song communicating an emotion that's genuine to people that they're connecting and identifying with? That's really what it comes down to. I could sit here and talk about formulas and ways of doing things all day, but at the end of the day,
Sure.
the song is there or it's not. And I watched Machine Gun Kelly go from, writing rap songs to writing pop punk songs. And if you listen to those lyrics, I don't care what age you are, I don't care, what genre you're into, those lyrics affect me. It's the same thing with Bring Me the
Yeah.
Horizon. They went from being super
Yep.
heavy to, writing more of a rock, active rock album. And again, those
Sure.
lyrics are undeniable. So
Yep.
sometimes things just skyrocket to the top because just the songs are there. The new Bad Omens is another great example. I love seeing bands like Bad Omens and Ice Nine Kills break after
Yep.
7 to 10 years of just grinding it out. Dance Gavin Dance, a perfect
Yeah.
example. 12 years on
Yep.
the grind, but they stayed consistent. They kept releasing albums.
Yep.
Even though they had singer changes, they just kept going and kept building brick by brick by brick.
Yep.
And now they're a countercultural band. I mean, they're literally they have that cult following, that is, and they'll be a band 10 years
Yes.
from now.
Yep.
I guarantee it. So
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So to kind of go into a little bit of the working with complex teams, obviously bigger artists have, more complex teams. The bigger you get, the more people you get on your team. I mean, that's kind of the goal, right? It allows people to, as you said, the people who are good at what they do to be able to focus on things that other people aren't good on.
mhm.
Um, could you go into how you navigate working with, the various people, such as like age, publicists, lawyers, record label representatives? I know that communication is a key thing, but could you go into that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's important for agents and booking agents, lawyers, and record labels and other people on the team to understand, even the business manager who does the accounting and stuff, to understand what the band is trying to do and understand the band's vision. If a band doesn't have a strong vision or they're in conflict with each other on what the vision should be, it's most likely that the rest of the team is not going to be able to accomplish that because there's um, a blurred end goal. We can all, anyone, any
Hmm.
booking agent can book shows, any manager can manage bands, any record label can drop a record, et cetera, et cetera. But if you don't understand what the big vision is, it's very difficult to operate in a place where you're going to be goal oriented versus just paper pushing, moving things along. And I think it's really
Yeah.
key for the team to listen, but at the same time, I think it's really key for the artist to value the expertise that these people are bringing to the table, because these are the people that do this all day long. Look at record contracts,
Sure.
look at promoter offers, look at the DSPs and where things could land seasonally, which would be better than others. They're the experts. So if you're hiring them as the experts to help you with your career, it's key for the artist to provide them a strong vision, and it's key for the manager to communicate that vision in order to pull it off. Now, some things can get complicated. You'll have to get creative. I mean, from my chair, I've been stubborn enough to listen to the visions and say, we're going to pull this off. I don't know how yet, but somehow we're going to find a way and we're going to pull it off. And I think that's
Yeah.
where the leadership side of management comes in, is you've got to get the team and the band with the vision to the end zone. And sometimes you get to the end zone and you can't run the touchdown in, but it's so key to do whatever you can to get there and do your best to try to make that vision happen, because at the end of the day, you're representing the band. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So we have time for one more question. And I saved this one because I feel like it's the one that most people are going to want to know. Um, what are some of the more effective strategies for securing, some of the bigger opportunities, such as like major festival slots and opening for well-established artists? I feel like that's a question a lot of, smaller
Mhm.
artists, local bands, are trying to figure out, because it feels like unless you know somebody, there's really no other way to do it unless you sell tickets, for a
Yeah.
venue or something.
Um, the harshest way I could put that is write a bigger song, create that attractiveness and
Okay.
get that attention on that song to where it's undeniable and they'll come to you. The other way to go about it is, if you hire a team, make sure your team is already in those channels and have those relationships and are able to put you in those submission lists and in those channels to get those opportunities. But, I could submit with a booking agent any baby band out there, but if it's not attractive enough with the numbers and the activity that's going on with that band, the festivals, the promoters, the other people given the opportunity will just pass over it. The key more than anything is
Yeah.
to build that hype around you, and then everyone will come after you. It's not the way it used to be in the MTV days, where if you were a local band and you wrote good songs, you could give it to the record label and they'd get it on MTV and put it on the radio and all that.
Yep.
Today, it's all about
They
building
would do the
yourself on the
artist
cell
development of
phone
it.
first. Yeah, all our attention's here.
Yep.
So if all our attention is right
Yep.
here, um, you need to basically get into a place where you're super attractive on the cell phone, and then that'll translate to real life after the fact with opportunities, etc.
Yeah.
So again, I've seen bands that weren't really that big get with the right team and they get all the opening slots on the big festivals and they get all the big tours, but sometimes they don't break. Where are
Yeah.
they after all those festivals and all those big tours? Why aren't they headlining? Because there's no conversion.
Yeah.
So the best way to do it, I think, honestly,
Right.
is just you've got to just grind it out. That's what will create a loyal fan
Sure.
base, and that's what will create a cult-like following that will stick with the band and fund the band for years to come. I had this meeting with a guy named Dave Strunk at UTA one time. He was the territorial agent for Arizona, and he was talking about his roster. And I was like, "How have you been here since for like 12 years? You've been here since the company opened or whatever." And Dave Strunk said, when I build my roster, I don't look for things that are spur of the moment, like the hype of today or whatever. He's like, I'm not trying to pick up Rebecca Black, where it's just this viral thing on a left
Yeah.
field. He's like, I look for cult-like followings. I look for bands that can consistently do the same business, and whether they're growing or not, they never get smaller because they have the same cult-like loyal following. So he had artists
Yep.
like the Blood Brothers and stuff like that
Mm.
could play the big festivals a couple times a year and then go away. And next year, those fans would still be there. If they want to take 2 years off, those fans are still going to be there, And his entire
Yeah.
roster was cult-like bands like that. They weren't these big viral things, but they were enough to sustain his roster, sustain his chair at UTA. And that's kind of the philosophy I've had with a lot of my artists is I don't want to work with artists that are not going to be popular 2 years from now. I want to work with artists that have followings that we continue to service and provide for as they provide for us over years to come. And if you look at Butcher Babies or Escape the Fate or even Lacey Sturm or Scary Kids, they have these followings where they're just rabid. The people will always be there. They're loyal. They're not the swipe and I'm done with it. They're just they're loyal to it. And finding
Yeah.
artists like that and building artists in that mentality has been fundamentally what I've always tried to stick with. So
Absolutely. All right. Well, Zach, thank you so much for coming in, and talking. This is one of our longer podcasts, and I wish we could go longer, but we've got another one right after this. So
for sure.
we'll have to
Thanks for
have you
having me.
back on again at some point.
Yeah, I appreciate
Yeah.
you guys, man. I love what you guys are doing. I love all the guests you're having, and yeah, man. Thanks so much. I'm very grateful.